Welcome to Sex Ed with DB. I'm your host, DB. Let's get into it. Hello. Welcome back to Sex Ed with DB. I, of course, am DB, your favorite sex educator and pleasure expert. And today we're bringing you an episode from the podcast Cramped. Do you get really bad period cramps? You are not alone. My periods are super heavy, and they have been for a really long time. And 30% of menstruating people experience severe period pain, meaning pain that keeps them from being able to live their normal lives. So why do we know so little about where this pain comes from and how to treat it? The Cramped podcast is looking for answers. Host Kate Helen Downey has had death cramps for over 20 years. Let that sink in. 20 years. Cramps that make her throw up, pass out, and go to the emergency room. Yet until she started asking questions for the podcast, she had no diagnosis and no treatment that worked. In season 1 of Cramped, Kate got answers to some of her most basic questions, like what causes period pain in the first place, why scientists often use only male cells, animals, and trial participants in clinical research, and why everyone on TikTok is telling her to, quote, balance her hormones. She got a diagnosis, a surgery, a treatment plan, and a much clearer understanding of why so many people are suffering without the help that they need. What was originally planned as a 10-episode limited series got a huge response. And she has continued the podcast, finding answers to listeners' questions about their own period pain and getting into the nitty-gritty with experts and doctors. Because it turns out, having a microphone gets her a lot more answers than having a uterus. Very sad, but true. Whether you experience cramps, love someone who does, or are just curious about a very common experience that hardly ever gets talked about openly, listen to Cramped wherever you get your podcasts.
The holy grail of period pain. A pill that stops cramps right in their tracks. Researchers have been searching for this for, not that long, actually. When you're curled up on a bathroom floor with waves of nausea, feeling like your whole midsection is a soggy towel that someone is wringing out from the inside with spiked gloves, you would give anything for a magic pill that just stopped the pain. Especially if you are one of the 25% of crampers for whom NSAIDs are not effective. What if I told you we might have found that magic pill? Or magic suppository, technically. But we might never actually get to use it.
What's happening to your body, we don't know, because we've never really studied the female body. Say it's all in my head, but the research is quite spotty. No, we've never really studied the female body. I go to the doctor to get dismissed. Try losing weight, you're just anxious. That's fine, that's cool, I'm not pissed. Just wait 10 years for a diagnosis. Psychosomatic, you're so dramatic. Hysterical, emotional, hormonal, erratic. Heart disease, chronic fatigue, depression and anxiety. Do you have pain? No, you don't, because we've never really studied the female body.
Welcome back to Cramped, the podcast where I try to find answers to my and other people's questions about their period pain. I'm your host, Kate Helen Downey. If you want to support this podcast and the work that we do, you can go to patreon.com/cramped and sign up for either a free tier or one of the 3 paid tiers. The perks are the same, whether you are on a free tier or you're contributing $5, $10, or $25 a month to help us do this work. Because we are not the American healthcare system, so we don't paywall the information or the community that you may need. Whatever tier you sign up for, you get bonus episodes, ad-free episodes, and access to our Discord community that is full of other crampers sharing their own experiences, information that's helped them, and cool studies like the one I'm talking about today. And just a quick reminder, I'm not a doctor. This is not medical advice. Everything that is presented in Cramped is my own or other people's personal experiences. I'm just a research nerd with a uterus and a microphone sharing what I've found. And today, what I found is the story of how a potentially extremely effective drug for treating period pain was discovered, studied, and then abandoned. And I want to say right up top, my main source for this episode is the book Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez. I highly recommend reading this book. Just make sure that you have a punching bag or a screaming pillow nearby for rage breaks, because you're going to need them if you read this book. I also use a 2023 article in Stat News by Callie McMurray. I will link all of these in the show notes. I'd like to introduce you to a drug called sildenafil citrate, but you probably know it as Viagra. In the early 1990s, it was being tested as a heart medication in a clinical study that just happened to only consist of male participants. Even though heart disease is the #1 cause of death for both men and women in the US, according to the CDC, this study only had male participants. Because women have those pesky hormone cycles that are so hard to account for. Sildenafil citrate didn't turn out to be a very effective heart disease medication, but many of the male trial participants reported having a lot more erections than usual. Interesting. Pfizer immediately pivoted and patented the drug as a treatment for erectile dysfunction, which affects between 5 and 10% of men under 40 and more as they age. And it makes total sense that sildenafil citrate would help men get erections. It is a PDE5 enzyme inhibitor. Okay, what the fuck does that mean? I read 1 million explainers so that you don't have to. We're gonna get real geeked out here. You probably learned in school about the fight or flight response. That when our bodies sense danger, blood flow is redirected to our major muscle groups so that we can respond quickly or run away from the danger. A similar thing happens when we get turned on. That blood flow is just directed to a different area. When more blood flow is needed to a certain area, a series of chemical signals waves through the blood vessels, including the gas nitric oxide. This signals the body to produce an enzyme called cyclic GMP, or CGMP. This enzyme CGMP is like warm bathwater for the smooth muscle fibers that surround the arteries. When CGMP shows up, those muscle fibers relax, and the artery physically gets bigger and wider, which lets a ton of fresh, oxygenated blood flood through into the areas that are saying that they need it. That's called vasodilation. It's what sends blood to your leg muscles if you need to run from a lion. It's what sends blood to your genitals if you're turned on and about to have sex. But your arteries aren't supposed to stay relaxed forever. You don't need that much blood going to your leg muscles or your genitals under normal circumstances. Once you escape that lion or you finish having sex, that CGMP needs to go away. That warm bathwater needs to get drained so that all the blood can go back to doing its usual job, helping you digest, clearing away waste products, all the regular, boring, everyday stuff. Once you don't need all that blood flow to the area anymore, an enzyme called PDE5 gets released. This enzyme's only job is to eat up CGMP. Or in the metaphor we've been using, I guess PDE5 drinks the bathwater? Gross. Once PDE5 has drank down all that CGMP, the smooth muscle fibers around the artery go back to their normal, tighter state, and the artery is back to its baseline, letting enough blood flow through to keep the cells in that area oxygenated and alive, but not providing the rocket fuel needed for sex or outrunning a lion. Sildenafil citrate, Viagra, works by blocking or inhibiting PDE5. The CGMP still gets released when you get turned on. The smooth muscle fibers lining the arteries get their warm bath and they relax to let a ton of blood into the area. But the sildenafil citrate doesn't let the PDE5 out to get rid of that relaxing bathwater. So those arteries stay relaxed. That's why there's that whole trope of somebody who took a boner pill and still has an erection 4 hours later and has to, go to the hospital. You can see why researchers originally thought this drug might work great for heart disease. Keeping arteries relaxed and bigger than usual would definitely help with clogged arteries. Turns out, because CGMP gets released for specific needs like sexual arousal or fight or flight, it doesn't just work on all the arteries all the time. And here's an even more nerdy side note. If you've ever had a relative who takes nitrates for heart disease, they work because nitrates flood the body with nitric oxide, which is what signals the release of CGMP, our bathwater. It turns out nitrates work really well for all over vasodilation. The downside is that all that overall vasodilation leads to things like low blood pressure and really bad headaches from too much blood going to your brain. So nitrates tend to have a ton of really severe side effects. Okay, deeply researched and technical explanation done. We're going back to my baseline level of geek, okay? Where were we? Researchers at Pfizer were testing out this drug that they thought might be good for chest pain in heart disease patients. And oops, that didn't work great, but they do discover that this drug can very effectively treat erectile dysfunction in men. Yay! Now, if women had been included in that early drug testing, they might have discovered a whole different application. Remember in our early season 1 episodes when we were breaking down what actually causes period pain? Dr. Kevin Hellman and Dr. Frank Tu at the GYRL lab told us about the accepted mechanism for dysmenorrhea. What doctors have accepted for decades causes period pain. That the muscle of the uterus is being signaled to constrict by all the prostaglandins, and it's constricting so much that the oxygenated blood isn't getting through. This causes ischemia, which is basically a Charlie horse in your uterus. The cells aren't getting enough blood, and they're signaling pain because they'll die if they don't get blood flow. Of course, Drs. Hellman and Tu now suspect there may be many more and different mechanisms of dysmenorrhea. Because if uterine blood flow, or perfusion, fixed all period pain, NSAIDs like ibuprofen would always work. And Dr. Hellman wouldn't be seeing MRIs of people in severe period pain with uterine contractions that actually have more perfusion than usual. But okay, just assuming that at least some dysmenorrhea is caused by this ischemia in the uterine muscle, finding a way to dilate those blood vessels and relax that muscle tissue around those arteries, that could help resolve that pain, right? So, knowing what we know about how sildenafil citrate works, 2 researchers at Penn State in 2007 thought this could be worth a try. They ran a study for 5 years, and they published their results in 2013 in a paper titled Sildenafil Citrate in the Treatment of Pain in Primary Dysmenorrhea, a Randomized Control Trial. You can Google that and find the full text of the study on the NIH website. Obviously, I'll put the link in the show notes. I just want to read you verbatim the first paragraph of the introduction to their study. Primary dysmenorrhea, PD, is by far the most common cause of pelvic pain in women. This has both psychological and economic impact, as dysmenorrhea accounts for 600 million lost work hours and $2 billion annually in the USA. It is most commonly attributable to excess endometrial prostaglandin production at the time of menstruation, which leads to abnormal uterine contractions, increased intrauterine pressure, vasoconstriction of small uterine vessels, and increased sensitivity of pain receptors, which consequently causes pelvic pain. Doesn't that just make your butthole unclench a little bit? Hearing the facts and the reasons this needs to be studied laid out so clearly and obviously by male authors, no less, it's such a relief. This study has 3 authors, and they're all male. Richard Legro and Alan Kunzelman, the 2 researchers located at Penn State, they decided that the best way to have the patients take the sildenafil citrate was not by swallowing a pill, but by what they call a vaginal preparation of sildenafil citrate. Those of us with severe period pain might be familiar with CBD suppositories for period pain. I imagine a vaginal preparation of the sildenafil citrate was like that. In the introduction to the study, they lay out their reasoning. The major advantages of vaginal route include accessibility, good blood supply, and the ability to bypass first-pass liver metabolism. Those headachy side effects from all over vasodilation, not a problem if the drug goes in the vagina and not through the digestive system. They hypothesized that, I'll let them tell you. We hypothesized that vaginal delivery of sildenafil citrate would induce local vasodilation of the uterine vessels, resulting in amelioration of pain in PD patients, while minimizing side effects as the majority of the active substance probably would not reach the systemic circulation. We're going to take a quick ad break, and we'll be right back.
'Cause we never really studied the female body.
Welcome back to Cramped. So they brought in their participants. Although 2 of the study authors were based at Penn State, the 3rd author is from the Beta Plus Center for Reproductive Medicine in Zagreb, Croatia, and the study was conducted in Croatia. I always picture these studies happening all at once, like on one day. All the participants get in a big room together, they get the drug all at once, and doctors are running around getting measurements and figuring it out. But that's almost never how it goes. Instead, it happens in a trickle, one participant at a time, especially with dysmenorrhea studies. After the participants passed a screening, they had to have primary dysmenorrhea with no other underlying cause like endometriosis or PCOS. They couldn't have high or low blood pressure because of the vasodilation. They couldn't have other chronic diseases, stuff like that. If they'd passed all the screening, they were asked to call the office when they got their next period. Here's a description of the study visit process from the Materials and Methods section of the paper. The study visit was not scheduled in advance because it is difficult for most women to predict the exact day of their next menstrual bleeding. Within 6 months of the screening visit, patients were instructed to call the coordinator when they got their period and were experiencing pain due to PD, primary dysmenorrhea. The study coordinator, depending on the availability of the facilities and the study personnel, scheduled subjects for that day, or instructed the subjects to take their usual pain medication and call during the next day if still in pain, or to call during their next cycle. These scheduling challenges make it much easier to understand why they only got 25 participants in for the study between 2007 and 2011. When I was in Illinois talking to Dr. Hellman and Dr. Tu's research team at the GYRL lab, they laid out these same challenges. It makes sense. When was the last time you got your period and started cramping during business hours? And at a time when it was possible for you to just drop everything and go sit in a doctor's office for 4 straight hours? And when was the last time you started cramping but were able to not take your usual pain meds while going through an administrative process for hours? It's a tough line to walk, and uteruses are famously difficult to schedule. The study was designed to have 62 total participants, so 25 fell pretty short of their sample size. And a sample size of 25 is for sure very small, especially considering only half of those participants actually got sildenafil citrate, the other half got a placebo. But even so, the results they got were really interesting. When participants came in while experiencing dysmenorrhea, they rated their pain on a scale of 1 to 100. On average, before getting the sildenafil citrate or the placebo, they rated their pain at an average of 93 out of 100. Ouch. The participants who got the sildenafil citrate rated their pain again 2 hours later, and this time they were at an average of 23 out of 100. And then after 4 hours, they were down to a 9 out of 100. Knowing what a 93 out of 100 feels like for me, I can very clearly imagine the relief of going from a 93 to a 23 to a 9. And participants reported no side effects. A cool and weird element of the study was also the placebo effect. The participants who got the vaginal preparation with no sildenafil citrate also experienced some relief, though not as much as the participants who got the drug. Participants who got the placebo went from an average of a 93 pain rating to 2 hours later rating their pain at a 73, and 4 hours later, they rated it at an average of 51. I don't really know what to make of that, aside from maybe being in a quiet room with no demands put on you for 4 hours, with doctors who are actually paying attention and listening to you. Maybe that helps period pain about half as much as a drug does. So, okay, we've got really promising initial findings, but a sample size a little over a third of how the study was designed. Their funding ran out before they could get enough participants in. Although they applied for additional funding from the NIH to finish the study, they were rejected twice. Richard Legro, one of the Penn State researchers, said in an interview that the reviewers just didn't think dysmenorrhea was worth studying. He also gave the fun little detail that both times he applied for further funding, the application was, quote, deemed to be in the lower half of grants submitted, and wasn't even fully reviewed. From the comments on the application, Legro could tell that the reviewers did not see dysmenorrhea as a priority public health issue. Other researchers like Chen X. Chen and Dr. Laura Payne have told me that many grant reviewers don't view dysmenorrhea as worthy of research funding because no one has ever died from dysmenorrhea. There's also the understanding that NSAIDs are already an effective treatment. So why do we need to look into it? And I mean, I get it. It is more urgent that we find a way to detect like ovarian and cervical cancer earlier and prevent it. But also, couldn't we just, I don't know, fund more women's health research so we don't have to choose between researching things that kill women and things that make their lives hell? We can actually research and improve both? Richard Legro said in an interview with Caroline Criado Perez, the author of Invisible Women, that until the NIH has an all-female review panel for women's health grants, he doesn't think there's hope for more grant funding for this study. Because men, quote, don't care or understand dysmenorrhea, which is wild coming from a male dysmenorrhea researcher publishing dysmenorrhea research papers with all male authors. I don't know. I agree, and it's also weird. Okay, so what do you do if you have promising early results on a drug's effect, but you need more funding? Especially when that drug is already an extremely profitable on-the-market drug. You might go directly to the company that makes that drug. It's already being marketed to men to treat erectile dysfunction. What if they could market the same drug to the other half of the population for an even more prevalent condition? I mean, that's a win-win, right? But apparently, it was crickets from Pfizer. According to Richard Legro, again from Invisible Women, the pharmacy industry, quote, doesn't usually fund investigator-initiated projects, especially if that drug is available generically. He also thinks pharma companies might avoid doing more research on a drug that's already out there. Because what if they study sildenafil citrate use in women and they find a bad effect? That might threaten the drug's use and safety in men. And they don't want that. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Men are getting everything they need out of this drug. Why would they risk that so it can help women? And this lack of research is a vicious cycle. If the pharma companies are relying on research to tell them where the opportunities for drug development are, and there's very few studies on dysmenorrhea, that opportunity is not going to be on their radar. I actually emailed Pfizer to see if I could get any insight into their decision on this. I sent them the study and Dr. Richard Legro's quote from Invisible Women about Pfizer not being interested in funding a study of the drug for this application. They emailed me back with one sentence. Pfizer no longer owns the Viagra brand. It was acquired by Viatris several years ago. Period. The end. Okay, well, you know I'm going to email Viatris and I'll keep you posted. So are any companies developing new treatments for dysmenorrhea? Thankfully, yes. This is just a quick look, but here's a few of them. Daré Bioscience is in development with a vaginal hydrogel that delivers an NSAID directly to the uterus area, just like they did with the sildenafil citrate vaginal preparation. This bypasses all the gastric side effects you usually get with an NSAID. There are 2 Japanese pharma companies developing hormone-based treatments for dysmenorrhea. Daewon Pharmaceuticals in South Korea has a new drug called pelubiprofen. Like ibuprofen, this blocks prostaglandins, but it's designed to be gentler on the stomach. This is an oral pill. It's already approved for treatment of primary dysmenorrhea in South Korea, and they're working on expanding into markets like Russia and Indonesia. In England, Viramal is working on a vaginal preparation of a drug called danazol. Viramal has been trialing a spray and a vaginal ring delivery system so the drug gets into the uterus and the surrounding tissue, but it doesn't get into the bloodstream as much. So far, it's looking good, and they signed a licensing deal in late 2025 to bring this product and other women's health drugs to a global market. So keep an eye out. And lastly, we have PNB Vesper Life Sciences in India. They're developing a drug called Baladol. And this is kind of cool because instead of targeting the prostaglandins like ibuprofen, it targets the immune system's role in inflammation. It inhibits the cytokine storm that the immune system often responds to prostaglandins and other signals with. From what I understand, this could be really helpful for dysmenorrhea that isn't due to ischemia or blood flow issues, but instead due to inflammation, especially from endometriosis. They were developing this drug specifically for dysmenorrhea, but when COVID hit, they found that it was also really effective against COVID-related inflammation. So there's a good reversal of the Viagra process. Study something to help with women's pain and accidentally discover something that's helpful for everyone. Obviously, I will be trying to get interviews with the researchers at all these places and asking them 1 million questions about how they were able to get these drugs funded and developed. And hopefully we can learn from that. Okay, this has been one of my geekiest episodes in a long time, so if you are still listening, you are a true nerd, and I love you the most. I know that sometimes the questions I have about the research and drug development process are naive. Like the question, why don't we just study period pain more? That's naive and simplistic. But it doesn't mean it's not a good question, and a lot of times there isn't a good answer. A lot of times the answer is no one's really paying attention, or no one really cares. And I don't accept that. I think the more of us who are asking this question to the people who are doing the research and making the funding decisions, the more the people in charge of those decisions will hopefully be like, hey, yeah, why aren't we? Maybe that's naive too, but if loudly asking stupid questions can get us somewhere, I will take that bullet. That's it for this week's Cramped. If you have any knowledge or experience with drug development and you would like to share, I really want to hear about it. You can email me at crampedpodcast@gmail.com or reach out to me on Instagram at KateHelenDowney. This episode took many, many hours to research, write, and record and edit. If you would like more of this kind of information, please support this work on Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/cramped and choose any tier. Even joining the free tier helps us prove that this is useful. But obviously, a paid tier helps pay the bills. See you next time.
What's happening to your body? We don't know because we've never really studied the female body.